a general overview of generational preferences, what we have been able to glean from studies, and a couple of other things I wanted to add to today's session. One, you do not have to share your generation with the room. If you do, let's consider it confidential for all the webcasts to know. Two, this is a U.S.-based, based on U.S. research. So if you were born abroad, raised abroad, we don't have the data, and I'll explain a little bit more of that. But do consider the information that we're presenting today is for U.S. generations. Our objectives for today are to make sure that we understand in a very general way the different generations. We have 4, soon to be 5 generations in the workplace. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how each generation, what might be inspirational and work from a communication standpoint to each generation, some of the things that motivate and have impacted the generations. And then knowing that, how would you then interact with those individuals in a generationally sensitive way? We'll touch on those. It's 90 minutes to put in a lot of information, so hopefully it'll whet your palate to do a little more research on your own as well, but this will give you a nice foundation. And these are the names of the generations that we'll be using in class today. I will highlight some other names that you may have heard. The Millennials are sometimes called Generation Y, like the letter, or Generation WHY, like why? The Baby Boomers are 26%. Sometimes Millennials are called Echo Boomers because it's the same size as the Baby Boomers, most often because it's their children. Generation X and Generation 2020 and Traditionalists are relatively small, about half the size, have less economic strength, less voice in the workplace, and they're going to be a smaller group overall for our purposes and what we're discussing today. And I do want to talk about the international piece. We didn't have the validated data in order to incorporate all of the different generations from around the world. There is some information out there if you're interested in researching for the generational differences between different countries. I will say, though, that for Generation 2020 and the younger generations, if you are urban, living in a city center, and Generation 2020 or close to thereof, they have a lot more in common with each other around the world than they do with the same generation within their own country if it's a rural or impoverished person. And I'm sure you can imagine why. The technology links them all to have a shared experience across the web. I can play video games with a friend in China. I can find out what's going on in the Middle East just by people posting things on YouTube. So the younger urban generation have a lot more in common globally than we did for generations past. So that's something to think about. Here's what the projections are for the workspace for the different generations. We have, we can skip and look just to what was going on maybe almost 10 years ago to close to what it is now. And 2020, we see Gen X sort of keeping the same steady pace, and the Millennials becoming a larger group, a percentage of the population. And where 2020 was virtually not a part of the workplace, they are coming. They will be here very, very shortly, and it is going to be a different work style, different communication style. And we want to be able to recruit and retain and have the ability to attract talent from that group and communicate in a way that attracts their attention. But the Millennials really overall are the Echo Boomers. They are a very large group and will be participating in a vast way throughout for the rest of the time. The fact that some workers who we had anticipated a shift out of the workforce will be staying in the workforce a little bit longer. Not as long as some of the recent projections have anticipated, but we will have all 5 generations in the workforce, and do in some cases. As far as we're concerned for today's purposes, we're going to learn a little bit about each generation, what impacted each generation, and we'll start with the traditionalists. Let's think about somebody that you know who was born before 1946. Just hold them in your mind. And we'll look at some of the traits, some of the things that have impacted them. World War I was one of the most, brutal wars in U.S. history. It impacted this generation quite a bit. The Great Depression, a lot of poverty, saving your money, not spending it. It can be one of the factors, and basically all of these different people influences. How many of you, when you saw Dr. Spock, thought of Star Trek? Well, Mr. Spock. Okay, I did, because that's my generation. But these are some of the people influences. Dr. Spock was a parenting and baby doctor who influenced this generation of parents how to parent their children. But some of the broader traits, sacrifice, discipline, and respect for authority, are really ingrained in this particular generation. One of the, and a lot of people think of the fax machine as something that is more 80s, or it came into more use in the 80s, but it did impact this generation. It was actually invented much longer, much before for this time period, and it came into use and impacted this particular generation. You do not have to put yourself in a box for your generation. You may align with some of the things for your generation, you may not. This may not be your country of origin, so some of the people influences and world influences or events may not impact you, but think about for your generation or for someone else's generation what might have. The baby boomers, competition. This was a very, very large group of people going into the workforce in a huge numbers. They had to compete for these jobs. I mean, there hadn't been this many people competing for jobs in prior generations. This was a large group of people. They had so hard work and long hours. Give me that corner office. Show me the money. We have the 80s, to think about. The PC, the personal computer, made a huge difference in their ability to work hard and long hours. And some of the people who impacted, we had the Beatles playing earlier. I don't know if any of you logged on or heard the music, came into the music. We chose the Beatles just as a nod to the baby boomers. But these are some of the individuals, and I think the assassinations in JFK and MLK assassinations, people remember where they were for those moments. It shifted their perception of peace in the world. Something that isn't up there that I'll address on the next slide as well was the legalization of the birth control pill. Had a huge impact on women being able to go into the workplace, control their families a little bit more. Sexual revolution, which, as you'll see, impacted the Gen Xers. We had AIDS, MTV had a big impact on us being able to experience music in a different way. The stock market crashed, so we looked at saving a lot differently for this. This generation was the first batch of latchkey kids. Smaller generation, a lot of self-reliance. We had to, and I'm saying we because I'm a Gen Xer, we had to, sometimes make our own lunches, walk ourselves, to school down busy, dangerous streets, and make our own lunches and things like that because mom was working. First generation really were in a vast number. Divorce was prevalent for this generation of kids. Their parents were the first really big wave of divorce, and so you had different single-parent households. You have Bill Clinton, Beavis and Butthead, Madonna. These are some of the major people influences. But as you dig down and you see where people are in terms of their work-life balance and their broad traits in the workplace, being free agents. The stock market crashed. My parents' jobs aren't guaranteed. My grandparents' jobs aren't guaranteed. My job's not guaranteed. So I'm going to be a free agent. I'm going to build my resume. I'm going to build a company of me, and that independence is really important. And we are on our mobile phones. Mobile phones had a huge impact. Started with the brick phone, which is about this big, and pagers. I don't know if anybody remembers pagers, but those technologies were very helpful. And again, we're generalizing here. This does not apply to every person or individual. You may not even see that it applies to you, but these are some general traits that are helpful to be aware of. And millennials, the large group coming into the workforce or already in the workforce. I wanted to interact with somebody. I sent a letter, put a stamp on it. It goes to them across the world, takes 3 weeks to come back. You write another letter, And that was how things were at the time. If you sent away for something, you had to wait 6 to 8 weeks. They still say 6 to 8 weeks on packages and delivery. It's 2 days now, but before this group, it was 6 to 8 weeks to get a package. And something else we had talked about customization. I don't know that it's on there, but this is the first generation. We have the internet. We have the ability to order things with our names on it, customize shoes. Does anyone remember the Nike, the very first time you could customize your Nike shoes to be your color, your size, whatever design you wanted on it? That really started with this generation. So immediacy is expected. The Oklahoma City bombing and Columbine and we talked about the baby boomers, just the general lack of safety with the assassinations. For this generation, it was schools not safe, right? I mean, our friends are getting shot at school. And chat rooms, we can see the different people who influence. Sammy Sosa, obviously, had an influence. But community service, you'll probably find, if you are of this generation or if you have staff that is just this generation, there's a very big commitment to community service. I think schools made a big push in this direction as well for this particular generation. It was a requirement for graduation for many of them. And cyber literacy, the ability to use any computer, anytime, anywhere, any piece of technology is very important. And tolerance. For different generations, diversity has had an impact in different ways, as we've seen in previous slides. For this generation, although we see some variance here, diversity just simply is. We see a lot more acceptance and celebration of differences versus some of the conflict. And there's a lot of confidence. People have different views on this, but when you can work technology and you know how to get the answer at a click of a button, there's a lot of confidence in that. And Google and Facebook obviously impacted this generation quite a bit with the ability to find anything, anytime, and friends anywhere. Their life being online, when we talked about transparency, it already is. We are already used to everything I do every day is on Facebook. My life is transparent. Therefore, my expectation might be that your life is transparent or your 360 is transparent. Everything that they do is textable, forwardable, and you can find almost anything about anyone. So that is something to consider. It's a value that's coming up for the younger generations as everything becomes more available online. The different generations have been influenced by events. The generations are divided by a time period, a definitive time period between various events. And if we're talking about international, those time periods are completely different for every country in the world because different major events have happened in different countries in the world. So what we call baby boomers here may be a totally different generation in time for another country. But even still, those don't dictate their common attitudes. Someone might have grown up in the same time period but grown up in different parts of the country, had parents of different generations. There are people who are Gen Xers who have traditionalist parents, so their values may align more with traditionalists than the baby boomers. Some of that really depends. And also there are cuspers, people who are born on the cusp of any one generation, so they might find themselves having the values or the technology or the influence of another generation. And of course, everyone gets pulled along, no matter where they are in the generations, to the technology and the environment that is current. Resumes are looking very different these days. If you look on LinkedIn or have had the opportunity to look at resumes, you see owner of my own, CEO of my own virtual hunt game, CEO, present, and while currently working at X, present. So people may even be working on two different things while they are have a job, and they may be doing oceanography and computer science. You just never know. The ability to work 24/7 and connect with people 24/7 has made it possible for people to do things outside of their workspace and still have a life, believe it or not. The traditionalist generation created human resources, manuals, guides, rules, and regulations. This is the generation that came up with a lot of the rules and regulations that we look at today. And the other ones probably make a lot of sense, but something to consider. Also, again, doesn't apply to everyone, but certainly something to consider. And this is often called the sandwich generation. This group may be taking care of their kids at home as well as an aging parent in both places. So there's that desire to build a stellar career. Well, I might have a high schooler, junior high schooler in my home still, and I have a parent who may need me to take them to doctor's appointments or have home care, and it's a lot. It's a lot, and so when we say everyone needs work-life balance, it is every generation. How many of you have seen or heard about a millennial may not wait for the 3 levels of command to talk to somebody? They might just go right to the CEO and make a phone call or send an email about an idea. It's kind of a seamless. There may be just no command. People are used to all these different levels, and you have to ask your boss, and then your boss has to ask your boss's boss, and then that might sit around for a little bit. And for somebody for whom immediacy is a value and transparency is a value, well, the leader of the whole company could be my dad. I mean, we can relate to each other, and we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing a lot of millennials and baby boomers connecting because there's that comfort, because these different generations are used to working with each other at home, and there's reverse mentoring going on where someone from the baby boomer side may be mentoring a millennial on one thing, and the millennial may be mentoring them on technology, etc. Hey, I had to figure out, just like what you had said earlier, I had to put myself in front of people, I had to figure out how they had to get my resume. This is a skill set, right? This is a skill set that I value because I had to do it. But maybe what if that skill set is no longer required and the world has just opened up, the accessibility has opened up. You can find anyone on LinkedIn practically. Even CEOs who have shied away from it have started little by little putting their profiles on there to connect with people. So it's something to think about. The baby boomers were the first generation of kids to be evaluated on their ability to get along with others in school. So when for the first time you're evaluated on your ability to get along with others, being a team player, how are you getting along, seeing people face to face, that's a value. That's a value that's ingrained from very early on. And the entrepreneur piece again is, if I have to take this whole thing with me, I'm going to take my resume, my skills, my everything on my back and be an entrepreneur. And that includes creating my own business within the business. It doesn't always mean leaving. Sometimes it just means, I have a really great idea for this company, and even if I have to build this myself, I'm going to do that. It's being even entrepreneurial while you're working within another organization. We've talked about a lot of different aspects. Obviously, there are so many more aspects within the workplace of what motivates us and how we communicate, etc. But thinking about yourselves for a little bit and what you saw about your generation, how many of you aligned 100% with your generation? In the room, we have 0 people that aligned 100% with their generation. Did we have anybody online that aligned 100%? How many of you aligned 70% with your generation? That's 0 people in the room, 70%. How many people aligned 50% with their generation? Okay, so that is the entire room at least aligned 50%. So everybody in the room aligned about 50% with the responses that I gave. And basically what I want to say about that is it's important to know that. We're giving you great information around the generations, but 50% of this information could possibly be invalid for the person with whom you're dealing or working with. So please, I invite you to consider that as you're working with people, and there's this tendency for us to want to put people in a box. It's human nature. It's absolutely natural and forgivable. And we want to say, oh, millennial, she's going to want this. Oh, traditionalist, he's going to want this. And the best thing to do is really to ask. It's the platinum rule. I was raised with the golden rule. My mom said, do you want to be treated that way? You always want to treat people the way you want to be treated? And the platinum rule really is asking people how they want to be treated. And something else that's come up, and some of you had the article that Glenn had sent out earlier, one of my favorite quotes from that article was that someone said, the biggest mistake I'm making in being a leader towards someone from the next generation is assuming that he wanted what I wanted when I was his age. So there are two sides to this, is presuming that someone is coming up in the same fashion that you did, has the same desires and goals that you do, that may be of a different generation, and two, just putting everyone in a bucket when we don't even have 50% matching on what the generational information tells us. No matter how someone is communicating with you, their intent is not to disrespect you, to waste your time, to hold you up, or to be inefficient or demanding. The goal of giving this out is to see the various ways that people prefer communication, to say, this makes sense. Somebody, if somebody is from X generation, there may be a lot of paperwork. Somebody from the baby boomers may be printing out a lot of things. And I've learned in asking my baby boomer colleagues, because I do this presentation quite a lot, why do you print everything out? And the answer that I've gotten on more than one occasion was, my vision has gotten worse. So my ability to read the screen in the meeting and see everything the way I want to see it, it just doesn't work for me as well on the computer, and I have to print it out. So there's a lot of paper and email and FaceTime. For baby boomers and traditionalists, we're seeing a lot more around, phone calls and meetings in person, whereas for Gen X and Millennials, it may be just, we can see each other sometimes, but it's going to save me a lot more time if I can just email you this or text it to you. And texting has become, very, very common for a lot of information to be sent across, and the BRBs and LOLs and words not being spelled completely out or misspelled. And I caution people from different generations to, that's not okay. In the workplaces, it works maybe on an instant message sometimes, but for formal communications and things like that, it does happen. We have seen people use very, very informal communications, and sometimes it's fun and eye-catching. Sometimes you can put something out there that says, do you want to LOL, laugh out loud, or some of these other things in some of the advertising that you're doing. Generational diversity is one form of diversity. We have so many other levels of diversity. We have nationality, we have gender, we have sexual orientation, we have different levels of education, etc. The jobs that they're going to have in 5 years and 10 years, we don't even have the classes at the university to teach for that yet, which is a really amazing conundrum to be in. That we're going to be, a lot of people are going to get some training right on the job, and when we talk about millennials, their desire for mentoring and training on the job and access to leadership is immediate access to leadership is pretty pressing. There's an opportunity to mentor everyone, I think. I think the mentoring relationship and the reverse mentoring relationship, just because someone has a preference doesn't mean it's going to work at Amgen, doesn't mean it's going to work in your group, doesn't mean it's going to help them be successful here. So if you have someone that you're working with who has preferences or keeps pinging people or emailing, or rather texting when they should be emailing or calling, there's an opportunity there to tell someone and to be a mentor and say, hey, I noticed X, Y, Z. I want to help you be successful here. And I just, for this particular group, this works for us a little bit better, and here's why. And so rather than being frustrated with the differences in the generations, there is a really great opportunity to have that dialogue and to have that conversation with someone, instead of just letting it fester and be potentially frustrated. But my initial experience, having worked in the workforce for so many years with my own closed office with a window, it was a little strange to go to a cube and then to that open space. But we all are adaptable, and our preferences can change with the time. I loved working in the open space and having that access and seeing my colleagues. Talking over them sometimes when we're on the phone was a little distracting, but it actually ended up being a strong preference for me, and I do like it. So thank you for making that comment. We all have the ability to adapt and change, and that's true of every single generation that is in the workforce today. The opportunity to try new things and to work with the new generations, and I hope that this class gives you some ideas on working with your colleagues, both older and younger, and from across different divides of generations, but also as a starting point to just thinking about differences in general. We're all very, very different and all very, very alike, and accepting that however someone is communicating, reaching out to you, etc., may not be coming from a place of disrespect or laziness or impatience, but rather a place of their knowing and their understanding and their experience. So I thank you all for your time. Thank you everyone online for your time.